Hello game makers, this is GameMaker Rob, and in today's episode we update our army screen and our shop so we can now sell items. Items will be updated with the gear list when we're swapping them between characters, and we have an easy way just to remove items from characters. We also have the ability to automatically remove items from characters if they change to a class that can't use ones they already have equipped. And we also make a very small step towards our battles. So let's get started. Okay, so the first change we are going to make is we are going to update our army screen script for the drawing units. It's becoming a pretty useful script. I'm using it in 3 different objects right now. And I needed to add a few more variables to it, so that's all we're going to do. So we're now going to pass, let me add it in here. We're going to add it facing and whether or not to draw the name of the unit as well. So we're adding 2 new variables. So we're going to add these 2 lines here and these 2 variables here. And then instead of sprite equals sprite grid idle facing east, we're going to use facing so we can decide whether to have the unit facing north, south, east or west. And we're also going to enclose the code that draws the name within our new boolean that's set here. It's the last argument. And because we've done that, everywhere where we have called the script previously, we're just going to have to update it with the 2 new arguments. Okay, so now we are going to go into the step event of the army screen. Let me just minimize this. So we're going to go into the press enter region here, and so we want to be in the change class region. So where we've done an update. So, and what we've done is we have a brand new region, and it's going to be to unequip inappropriate gear for this class. So, this is the code. We need a start point and an end point. That's what this is for, because what we're going to do is we're going to check every inventory slot for this particular unit. If it can't be used, if it has an item and it can't be used by that class, then we're going to add that item back to the inventory, so increase the quantity of that item by 1, and we're going to set the entry for that unit for that particular slot to empty. So for example, if he is a fighter with a sword in the left hand and he switches to a class that can't use it, then his left hand is going to be empty and the sword entry is going to increase by 1 for quantity for the global inventory list. So we've got a for loop to go through those entries. We don't need these show debug messages. Let me just get rid of these. Make it a bit nicer. Okay, so we're going to check what item is in the slots for that unit. So left hand, right hand, item 1 or 2, that kind of thing. If the item isn't empty, then there's something in that slot. We want to check to see if that item can be used by the new class. So can be used by this class is going to either equal 0 or 1. If it equals 0, then that means that on our sheet here, the item stat sheet. So for example, if it's a short bow and we switch to a mage, then he can't have it. So we've got to get rid of it. So like I said, we're going to increase the quantity of that item by 1. That's what this does. And we're going to set the slot for that character, for that unit, to empty. That's what this is going to do. So minimize this now. And then in the backspace region, if you remember, we weren't clearing the list between characters. So when you switch between characters, there could be stuff in the gear list before we'd even selected an area. So all we're going to do is whenever we press backspace, if we're inside this bit here, we're just going to clear the list. Okay, now we are going to do the draw GUI event for the army screen. Just minimize this for a minute. In the choose unit region, we are just going to add 2 new variables to the script because we updated it, facing east and true. And then in draw selected unit, same thing. And then there's nothing in display options. Change class, same thing. And then nothing here, is there? No. Then in display gear, so we have, this used to be a comment, but I changed it into a region. And I did put in a comment for the last week's video to see if you can use a right mouse button to remove an item, but it just made more sense to add the empty item to the gear list every time it was populated. So this means we can just click on the empty item and it will remove whatever item is equipped in a slot, which makes it really easy. So that's why we're adding this to the list, and the rest of this code should be the same as before. And then in display gear list, down here, line 239, in the comments I put I was going to use a script, and it's going to be for where we would add the item back to a gear list, because previously if there was an item equipped on a character that wasn't in the gear list, and it got added back to the inventory, the gear list wouldn't be updated. But I just figured this would be easier to put here than making a script for it. So this line is going to check to see if the current item in the unit slot already exists in the list, because there's no need to add it to the list if it already is in there. If it was in the list, it would return a value of 0 or greater. If it's not in the list, it's going to return -1. So if it returns -1, that means the item isn't currently in the list. So we're going to add it back. So that's what this line is going to do. It's going to add the item to the list. And we want to keep the same order of items that we had in the beginning. So for example, a dagger should always come before a sword. Sword should always come before like a bow. And that's this function here, thisListSort, is going to sort it for us. True means we want it in ascending order, so starting from 0. You can have it to false, which means it will sort it so the bottom would show first. And that's it. That's all the code we need to do that. Everything else in here should be the same. And now we can test it. Okay, so let's test it now. So army screen, let's go to bots and let's change his gear. If we click on a sword and we switch to a dagger, then you can see the dagger is gone from the list. If we click on a sword again, then the dagger's back. Or if we choose dagger and then empty, it works like that. Let's give him a sword back. And so this is testing the empty slot and adding items back to the gear list. So both of those things work. If we switch but to a priest, priests cannot use swords or leather, so both of those items should go. Or maybe there's a better class, maybe an archer. So archers, oh, wrong list, wrong CSV. So archers, they cannot use swords, but they can use a leather chest. So if I switch this character to an archer, he should lose his sword, but he should keep his leather chest. And there we go. And you can see in the top left, the amount of swords has gone up to 3. And we'll go to change gear, click on here, you can only use a dagger. And we change it back to a fighter. Change gear. Give him a sword, you can use a sword again. So as long as you have this working as I do, then you are at the same place. Okay, so we can now go into the shop object. And in the create event, we have added quite a few new enumerators and changed one as well. So we've now got display, buy and sell. This is going to be the first option because when you go into a shop, you might want to sell your items, or you're either going to want to buy items or units. So that's going to be your first choice. If you choose buy, then it's going to get switched to display items units, which used to be our first option. And that's going to give you an option of items or units. If you choose one of those, then you get taken to these two. If you choose sell, then there's things you can do in the sell state. Buy will just switch you to this one really. So we're going to set the state to display, buy or sell. And the first option is going to be buy. We've added 2 new entries to the text array, buy and sell. We've got 1 new list of inventory. This is going to hold, this kind of basically works the same as gear list. It's going to hold any items the player has a quantity of more than 1 of. And that's it for the create event. So if we go into the step, first region, so we have a new region for display, buy, sell, and the options are going to range between buy and sell. The rest of it is the same as what we've done before, and we've changed the name of this enumerator to display items units. And down here we've got a sell state. If we press left or right, we want to cycle between the options, between the items for the inventory list. Although if there are no items in the inventory, then I think we should clamp it as well, just to be sure. There we go. Then in choose an option, so we've changed the name from display options to display items units. The rest of the code is the same. It's just the name of the enumerator that's changed. Then this region here is new. So if we are displaying or selling, displaying buy or sell, so this region's for. If you press enter and the option is on buy, then we want to set the state to display items or units and set selected option to items. So that's basically where the object used to start at. Otherwise, if we choose sell, then make sure the state is set to sell. Selected option needs to be 0. And we're going to add all of the items from global inventory back to the list, to the list of inventory. Let's also clear that list. List of inventory. So every time we switch to sell, we want to clear the list and then populate it with whatever items we have available for sale from the inventory. And then in the sell state, if the size of the inventory is greater than 0, this is if we're pressing enter. So if we press enter, we want to check the item that we want to sell. So it's going to be a sword, dagger, chest, whatever. and then we want to reduce global.inventory of the item by 1. And then we also want to remove the item from list of inventory if the quantity is less than or equal to 0. That's what this is going to be. So that's the check there. If it's less than or equal to 0, remove that item from the inventory. And here we're just clamping selected option. Say for example, we sell the very last item, then selected option needs to drop down to the next one. Otherwise, it can cause us some problems, either a visual glitch or maybe a crash, depending on the problem. So that's what this check is there for. And down here, where we're saying go back to display options or exit shop. So basically, we're just checking if the state is in units or items. Then we want to go back to display items units as previous. If we're in cell or display items units, then we want to go to display by or cell. If we're already in display by or cell, then just exit the game. So there's an extra layer that we have to go through to exit the game. This means though that, say for example, you are in selling and you want to go to buy, you don't have to press as many buttons as you would otherwise. That kind of thing. So if we go to the draw GUI area, and again we've changed display options to this, and this region we're also checking for display by or cell, and this region is going to be displaying text for the options. So it's either going to show by or cell, or it's going to show items or units. So if the state is items or units, then we want to show items and units. Otherwise, we want to show buy and sell. And then we only have 2 options for each. So our for loop can go from either here or here. And we want to go to I start +1. So if I just show you the create event, if the for loop is starting here, want to go to there and back again. Otherwise, if we're starting here, we want to go to there and then back again. So that's all this is about. That's all we're doing here. And with count, we're going to use that to basically draw the text. So because we want to draw the options in the same place regardless of whether we are showing buy or sell or units or items. We can't use I because I is going to be different depending on the option. So we're going to use count for that instead. Then in the units region, again we've updated the variables here for facing east and true. And this whole region, this whole area here is new because we can now sell items. So we're going to set the drawing coordinates, set the scale, get the item width and height. Although this should be times scale rather than times 2, just in case you want to change the scale. And then we've got for loop, very similar to how we draw items in the gear list in the army screen. Some drawing coordinates. We want to check which item we're trying to draw. We want to know the quantity of the item as well, because we're going to draw that as well. A background box for the sprite, the item sprite we're trying to draw, and then quantity, we're going to draw it in the bottom right, so we might as well set the H line and V line to bottom right. We're going to draw it in yellow. We're going to use the FNT editor font, and then these coordinates will position it for the bottom right, and then we're going to draw an X plus the number of the quantity, and then this is the same code as we have here. It's just the same as this. Basically, If I equals selected option is this thing we're trying to sell, then highlight it. That's all it does. So if we run the game, shop, and if we go to sell, you can see these are the items we could sell. If I sell a leather chest, then the selected option should drop down to the sword without us having to press anything. If I sell the dagger, then all we've got is swords. If I go to buy, and then items, let's buy 3 chests, a bow, and 2 axes. If I press backspace twice and go to sell, you can see our list has been populated with stuff we can sell again, like this. I know it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, like this on the buy items they're drawn at normal scale, and in sell they're drawn at double scale. I'm just getting the code working right now, because the stuff is just visual. It wouldn't take much to update. I'm just trying to get as much content in here as we can before we do the fine-tuning. So make sure we can buy units as well. Bought 2 fighters and an archer. Awesome. And the last thing for today is we have a little bit to do in getting the battles set up. Haven't got very far, but at least you can see the direction I'm heading with it for now. So inside the player object step event, we want to be in the walking region, and in this region here. So this line has been changed. If it's a battle map, then we want to set the state of our test object to a new enumerator called setup battle. Otherwise, the state is going to be conversation. We're going to set this up inside the test object in a minute. We're also going to save the map type inside the test object, but we need to call it something different to map type, which is why we have an underscore on it as well. And the rest of it is the same. No other changes to the player object. Okay, so if we go into the test object and the create event, you can see we have our new enumerators, battle states. We should probably rename this object to battle as well, but I'm just going to leave it test for now. So idle is going to be the state that it's set to when we don't need it to do anything, which is why we set it to idle here as well. Setup battle, this is going to check DS terrain data. It's going to check what units are in which spawn tiles. If you remember, in our missions, we were placing mandatory units for the player, and the position that they are is going to be saved in this list here. You'll see that in a minute. Choose units is where we get to pick the extra units we want to take into the battle. Conversation is just displaying the conversation like we had before, but now we have a state for it. In battle is not something we're going to use today, but that's going to say, okay, well, now we're in battle, so we don't want to display the same things we were in the conversation. Done. That's just a state that allows us to reset everything. So it's going to reset the player states. It's going to set the test state to idle. So that's what all these enumerators are for. Again, spawn tile list is going to usually should be 8 entries long, and each entry is either going to have a unit or not, and we're going to populate it through the data that's stored in DS terrain data. Okie doke, so go to the end step. Previously we had this line here. We were just checking to see if the player was talking, but now we have a state system for the test object. We're just going to say, are we in the conversation state? And then I've moved all the conversation stuff into its own region like this. So this hasn't changed. This just takes us through the conversation line by line. If we get to the end of the conversation, then most of this is the same. Story, except for here. If the map type is not a battle, then we're just going to say we're done for this object and set the state to done. If it is a battle, then we want to tell the object that we are now in a battle. And then we're going to say if the state is done, we're just going to reset the values as before, with the extra thing of setting the test object to a state of idle. And then this whole region is new for setting up the battle. We want to clear our list to make sure we don't have any extra things we don't want. And we're going to use a double for loop that checks every cell of the grid terrain data. We're going to grab the list of that grid. We're going to say, okay, if that list has a spawn tile, does that spawn tile have a unit? And whether it has a unit or not, it's going to get added to the spawn list. And this is how we're going to draw the units that are available for the battle. And as soon as we've done this double for loop, we want to say to the test object, we're now ready to choose units. Last of all, if we go to the draw GUI region, so here's our conversation region. Previously it was just if show map, but now we're going to say, okay, are we in a conversation? And then this whole region is new in the draw GUI. If we're choosing units, we're going to draw the same background we have for the army screen. We're going to set a scale of 3. We're going to get a scaled tile width and tile height for the width and height of the tiles. We're going to want to draw from the center left of the screen. We're going to have 8 tiles and whatever units are there. Counter is going to allow us to go through the spawn tile list 8 times. You always need to use something like this if you've got a double for loop, usually. And then we're just going to set the drawing coordinates for each of the tiles. We're going to draw a spawn tile for every entry. So if there's a unit on the spawn tile, then we're going to draw that here. And we're going to use our lovely updated script. This was the main reason we updated it, because I wanted them to be facing south. It looked weird when they were facing east, so I have them facing south and it looks much better. And we don't want to draw the names, so let's just check the draw. I don't think we need that. No. Okay, so no changes in the draw event. Let's run the game. If we move to this point here, we should have a battle. So what's happened is we've got a state that's going to be a setup battle. It's going to be from the player object, and then in setup battle we've done our double for loop. We've populated our spawn tile list. There's 3 characters that are mandatory on this map, so that's what you can see here. On the next episode we'll be able to choose a tile that isn't already occupied and to place a character there. And then after that we would be able to start the battle, or we'll have the conversation and then the battle will start. So I hope you enjoyed the episode so far. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.